Chapter 36. While Audrey recalled the conversation between her father and elder brother about this situation, she put in her own words, they believe that the government's structure is too chaotic. Every election, if there is a change of the ruling party, there will be a change of personnel from top to bottom. It makes things a mess and lowers efficiency tremendously. Not only does it cause the battle loss, it also brings great inconvenience to the civilians. Klein knew very well that as there was no example to reference, the Lone Kingdom had yet to evolve into a system that examined public servants. The political situation was still in its preliminary stages. Therefore, after every election victory, many so-called positions would be awarded to members and supporters. Emperor Roselle not establishing such an institution in Intis does not match his personality. Could it be that he diverted his focus to other things later in life? When the hanged man, Alger, heard that, he interjected with a soft chuckle, they believe. Then their beliefs are a little slow. Perhaps they will only feel the itch a year after they get bitten by black mosquitoes. Black mosquitoes were a type of creature that resided in the south of the Lone Kingdom. It was extremely venomous, and its venom made victims have the urge to rip apart their skin. Audrey extended her palm and covered her mouth, ignoring the hanged man's mockery. She expressed the core information of what she said. Unfortunately, they are temporarily unable to find a good solution to replace the system. Klein listened carefully and felt that the topic was in the domain of his expertise. He smiled faintly and said, this is a simple problem. The Footaholic Empire and the decadent countries that studied the Footaholic Empire had very advanced experiences of success. Simple? Audrey returned with a question in puzzlement. Although her education did not include politics, she often heard from the discussions of her father, brother, and people around her. She had a sufficient understanding of similar matters. Klein felt as though he had returned to the message boards of yesteryear. Composed, he said, an examination, just like an entrance examination for college, hold an exam that is open to the public. It can be split into 2 rounds or 3 rounds. Use the most objective method to select the elite, but Audrey knew what sort of objection this would entail before she had the chance to arrange her thoughts. Klein continued, after which use these elites to fill the positions of the cabinet, the county government, the city government, and the various towns. Yes, the positions that are directly handling matters, such as the secretary of the cabinet. Different positions should be given different requirements. The 2nd or 3rd rounds can be tested based on locale and region. Professional matters should be left to the professionals. As for political positions such as ministers, governors, or mayors, they will be left to the parties that win the election. That is a slice of the pie they deserve. Alger, who lacked interest in such matters, unknowingly turned his head and listened carefully. Audrey frowned slightly as she fell into deep thought. There's no hurry in replacing everyone at once. The cabinet and various agencies in the civil service will be crippled if that happens. You can have an examination every year or every 3 years. They can be gradually replaced. Finally, in light of the kingdom's expansion and the salaried civil servants' resignations that will bring in vacancies, you can systematically allot spots. Klein fully expressed his talent as a keyboard politician. He then faced his palm outwards and said, such a design can bring the kingdom's insightful elites into the government, regardless of the party in power or who the minister is. The civil service will allow the kingdom to maintain its basic and effective operations. Of course, a side effect was the birth of the undying devil that was bureaucracy. While considering the suggestion, Audrey asked doubtfully, are you implying that even if those ministers become monkeys, the effects would be insignificant? No, Alger interjected suddenly. I believe that monkeys are a better choice than the present ministers. He paused before adding, after all, monkeys only need to eat, sleep, and mate. They would not come up with foolish ideas and insist on brainless projects. Mr. Hanged Man, it sounds you have quite a terrible superior. Klein sat at his seat of honor and shook his head in silent amusement. Audrey ruminated over the suggestion Mr. Fool had offered and after a while said in surprise, it sounds like it actually might work. It's a very simple but effective solution. She looked at Klein and sincerely marveled. Mr. Fool, you must be an elderly person with outstanding intelligence who is very experienced in life. The corners of Klein's mouth twitched a little as he looked at the hanged man and Justice for a few silent seconds. Let us end today's gathering here. If Miss Justice is able to influence her family and effect change on this matter, I can guide Benson ahead of time and give him a chance at becoming a civil servant. On careful thought, Benson was indeed suitable for such a career. However, it is unlikely Justice would take the initiative to do it. This is because the hanged man and I can easily find out which noble suggested it and basically guess her identity. Of course, she could do it through a roundabout manner secretly, By your will, Audrey and Alger stood up together. Klein leaned back slightly and severed the connection. He saw Justice and the hanged man's illusory and blurry figures instantly shatter and dissipate above the gray fog in the opulent palace where gods seemingly lived. He was the only one sitting silently at the head of the bronze table. Klein did not plunge into the gray fog like the other time to leave. This was because his mind was still energetic enough after becoming a Beyonder. The reason why he had ended the Tarot Club early was because he learned the true attitude the Nighthawks had towards the Antigonus notebook. He decided that he had to search for it seriously and not sleep all the way. Doing so would make Dunn Smith suspicious of his activities at home. Furthermore, he had benefited quite a lot this time. Klein sat on the high-back chair at the head of the bronze table. His arms leaned on the armrest as he crossed his fingers while he observed the boundless gray fog carefully. He found the place serene, as though no one had stepped into it for 10 million years. When he established the connection to summon the hanged man and Justice, he acutely noticed something. That was the fact that, as a Beyonder himself, he had the ability to touch another dark red star. Does this mean I can summon one more? Klein recalled the feeling and muttered in confirmation. However, he did not have the urge to make an attempt since he did not know what the identity of the newcomer would be or what sort of attitude they would have. After all, not everyone was like Justice or the hanged man, who had unique personalities that easily blended in and took whatever they needed. They even seemed willing to conceal matters. If he pulled someone like Dunn Smith, then the mysterious organization he had just established would instantly come under the watch of the church as an evil organization's boss. His future would be worrying. Klein knew that the gray fog was special. He knew it was not something a Beyonder at Dunn Smith's sequence could see through, but the problem was that since he had the powers of a Beyonder, he had to consider the existence of the gods. Klein had chosen to carefully believe that the 7 orthodox gods existed in reality. Of course, he was more tenable to the belief that these gods were just more powerful than high-sequence Beyonders. Furthermore, they were under strict limitations. At the very least, ever since the 5th epoch, apart from a few oracles, they have not appeared again. Forcefully pulling people here isn't a good thing. No one would wish to be pulled into mystery for some baffling reason. Let's wait and see how things go in the future. Klein sighed and stood up. He released his spirituality and sensed his Bodhi's existence. Then he began imitating the heavy feeling of rapidly plunging down. The scenes in front of him changed. The gray fog and dark red instantly departed him. Klein felt like he had torn through endless water membranes before ultimately seeing the real world, his room in darkness. This time, he was fully awake and seriously took in the entire experience. Strange. There are some differences between the gray fog and the spirit world. Klein moved his limbs and felt the existence of his body. After he seriously thought through the experience, he shook his head, walked to the desk, and pulled open the curtains. Whoosh! The curtains were drawn as sunlight poured in, illuminating the room. As he looked at the street outside the oriel window and the pedestrians going back and forth, Klein took a deep breath and muttered silently, "It's time to go out and work. How should I act as a seer? It cannot be rushed. All I can do is use spirit vision now." Backlund, Empress Burrow. Audrey Hall looked at herself in the mirror. She saw her cheeks flushed red with excitement and her eyes so bright that they would have daunted anyone from looking into them. She did not examine any of this as she hurriedly recalled. She picked up the ruby-studded fountain pen and wrote the formula to the spectator potion on the exquisite goatskin parchment: 80 milliliters of pure water, 5 drops of autumn crocus essence, 13 grams of cow teeth peonal powder, 7 petals of elf flowers, a matured manhell fish's eyeball, 35 milliliters of goat-horned black fish blood, few. Audrey heaved a sigh of relief as she read it a few times to confirm that she had not made any mistakes. She had the urge to dance again, but reminded herself to remain restrained. After some thought, she began writing various chemical names around the potion's formula. She then faked the page into complicated and messy chemistry. Yes, as long as one doesn't read it carefully, a person who flips through this randomly will not discover the details I have hidden in here. Excellent. Audrey praised herself and turned her mind towards the acquirement of the materials. They'll first search the few vaults we have, they'll then attempt to exchange for the missing parts with others. If I still can't gather them all, I can only seek help from the hanged man or the fool. What can I offer as payment? After some thought, Audrey closed the notebook and placed it on a tiny bookshelf. Following that, she briskly walked to the door and pulled it open. A golden retriever was sitting obediently outside. The corners of Audrey's mouth curled as she revealed a radiant smile. "Susie, you completed the mission perfectly." In the serialized stories on the newspapers, detectives would often have a capable assistant. I think there should be a huge dog supporting a real spectator. in an underground basement lit only by a flickering candle. Alger Wilson raised his palm and looked at it carefully. After a long while, he let out a sigh. It's still that miraculous. I was unable to figure out any specific details at all, despite having made sufficient preparations. He failed to understand how the fool had completed the summoning. He moved his gaze down and looked at the goatskin parchment on the table in front of him. At the title head of the yellowish-brown parchment, there was a Hermes sentence written in dark blue ink. 7. Seafarer. Chapter 37. Under the scorching afternoon sun, Klein left his house. Since he had to walk all the way from Iron Cross Street to Welch's place, he wore a linen shirt instead of his formal attire of top hat and leather boots. He wore a matching brown coat, a round felt hat, and a pair of old leather shoes. That way, he did not need to worry that the stench of his sweat would contaminate the rather expensive suit. As he went down Daffodil Street, he strolled toward Iron Cross Street. When he passed by the square around the corner, he subconsciously took a glance. The tents had already vanished. The circus troupe from before had left after finishing their performance. Klein originally imagined the animal trainer who had helped him tell his fortune to be a hidden expert. He believed she had purposely appeared to guide him after discovering something unique about him, and that she would meet him and provide hints for the future. However, none of that happened. She left for the next stop in the tour with the circus troupe. How can there be so many cliched tropes? Klein shook his head while grimacing a smile. He turned toward Iron Cross Street. Iron Cross Street was not characterized by just a single street. Like its name suggested, it was formed by two roads that crossed each other. With the intersection at its core, it was split into Left Street, Right Street, Upper Street, and Lower Street. Klein, Benson, and Melissa previously lived on Lower Street. However, the residents living at his former apartment and the surrounding area did not think of the area as Lower Street. Instead, they created the term Middle Street. By doing so, they made a clear difference between those staying there and the poor who lived 200 meters down the road. There, a bedroom was occupied by 5 or 6 people, and sometimes even up to 10. Klein walked along the periphery of Left Street. As he let his mind wander, he recalled the Antigonus family's notebook and how it was missing. He thought of its importance to the Nighthawks and thought of the deaths that resulted from it. His heart slowly turned heavy as his face turned ashen. At that moment, a familiar voice sounded. "Lad, oh." Klein turned his head curiously and found himself by Smyron Bakery's entrance. Mrs. Wendy with a head of gray hair was greeting him with a wave and a warm smile. "You don't look very happy?" Wendy asked genially. Klein rubbed his face and said, "A little. Regardless of your worries, tomorrow will always come," said Mrs. Wendy with a smile. "Here, try out my newly created sweet iced tea. I'm not sure if it suits the palate of the locals." "Locals? Aren't you one, Mrs. Smyron?" Klein shook his head in amusement. "Trying out something means it's free, right?" Wendy Smyron raised her chin a little and said, "You guessed right. I'm actually a Southerner. I came to Tingen with my husband, but that was more than 40 years ago. Heh. Back then, Benson was not born yet. Even your parents did not know each other. I have always been a little unaccustomed to the dietary preferences of Northerners, and I'm always missing my hometown's food. I miss pork sausages, potato bread, roasted pancakes, vegetables fried in lard, and roasted meat with specialty sauces. Oh, and I also miss sweet iced tea." Klein suffused a smile when he heard that. "Mrs. Smyron, this sure is a topic that makes me hungry, but I feel a lot better. Thank you very much. Delicacies can always cure sorrow." Wendy handed him a cup of brownish-red liquid. "This is sweet iced tea I made according to my memories. Try it and tell me if it's nice." After thanking her, Klein took a sip and found it resembling iced red tea from Earth. However, it was not as stimulating. The taste of tea was stronger and felt more refreshing. It instantly expelled the heat brought by the burning sun. "It's excellent." He marveled. "That puts me at ease." Wendy smiled with squinted eyes as she watched him finish the cup of tea in a genial manner. After chatting with Mrs. Smyron about his moving, Klein returned to the street he was most familiar with. There were far fewer street-side hawkers in the afternoon. They gathered again after 5:30. The ones that stayed behind looked drowsy and listless. The moment he entered the area, Klein's heart suddenly felt overwhelmed by darkness. His heart felt heavy, down and gloomy for an inexplicable reason. What's happening? He sharply sensed something wrong about himself. He immediately stopped and observed his surroundings, but did not see anything strange. After some thought, Klein raised his hand and tapped his glabella like he was thinking. The extent of his vision immediately transformed. The auras of the hawkers and pedestrians all appeared. Before Klein could observe the colors of their health, his attention was pulled away by the colors that represented gloominess. He was unable to determine the exact thoughts of the observed, but the despondent, apathetic, and gloomy impression was deeply carved into his heart as he surveyed the area. He realized that even the sun could not disperse those dark colors. It was a sense of gloom that tainted them from years of repression. Upon seeing this, Klein instantly understood the reason. Just as old Neil said, activating his spirit vision easily pulled him into unfamiliar environments and made him feel discomfort. It was also easy for himself to be affected by the emotions of others. A similar principle could be used on an ability like perception. This was an ability he obtained without additional practice after becoming a seer. It was a passive sense that could not be declined. It allowed him to directly sense the existence of anything abnormal. There was bound to be a level of interaction when perceiving things. Therefore, in the beyonder eyes of someone like a spirit medium, the intensity of everyone's perception is clear. It is like a fire in the night. Therefore, people with high perceptivity were naturally affected by the intense atmosphere of anything abnormal. It could only be repeatedly practiced to grasp, control, and adapt to such outcomes. Such a repressed color is probably formed over extended periods of time, right? Klein sighed as he shook his head, feeling somewhat affected. He tapped his glabella twice again and tried hard to converge his spirituality. Tap, tap, tap. Klein walked toward the apartment and sensed for any abnormal existences or tiny connections while also searching for the Antigonus family's notebook which he had hidden. The streets were the same as usual. There was filthy water and trash on the streets. It only cleared up when he reached the apartment's entrance. Klein pushed open the half-closed door and circled the first floor in the darkness that the sunlight could not reach. The wooden stairs creaked constantly as he went up them. The second floor was as dim as always. Klein released his perception and looked into the darkness. However, not only did he fail to discover any clues regarding his notebook, he even failed to see any invisible spiritual bodies. If it's so easy to encounter them, most ordinary people would not have already sensed the existence of extraordinary matters. Klein sighed in reflection. He had already understood that most spirits did not exist in the form of spiritual bodies, but in the form of spirituality. Only a spirit medium could effectively communicate with them. After circling the third floor once, Klein left the apartment and retraced his memory's footsteps towards Welch's place. He walked for a full hour but did not discover anything along the way. Standing outside the garden bungalow, Klein looked at the building through the locked iron gates and mumbled to himself, "There's no need for me to search Welch's place, right? Captain and Madam Daly must have done a carpet search of the place. Besides, I don't have the key. They can't expect me to climb the walls, right? They'll try another path tomorrow. I've walked so much today, but there are no step counter rankings." While lampooning, Klein returned to the nearby district. He planned on taking a public carriage to Blackthorn Security Company to retrieve his daily allocation of 30 bullets. He needed to make use of his time and practice. A seer's lack of quick and effective offensive means could only be made up with his revolver and cane. The district around Welch's place was relatively clean. Shops with clean and bright windows lined the two sides of the street. At the turn of the street, Klein was just about to seek out the carriage stop when his gaze swept past a few signboards on the second floor. Harrod's Department Store, Military Veterans Mess, Divination Club. Divination Club. Klein silently repeated the name and recalled that he had to act as a seer. Yes, I should take a look and seek out new ideas. Amid his mixed thoughts, Klein went across the street and went to the second floor. He entered the main foyer to see a beautiful female attendant. The woman with coiled brownish-yellow hair sized up Klein before saying with a smile, "Sir, do you wish to have your fortune told? Or do you wish to join our club? What are the conditions for entry?" asked Klein casually. The woman explained with great familiarity, "Fill in your particulars and pay an annual membership fee. The first year is £5 and subsequent years will be £1 a year. Don't worry, we are not like political or business clubs which allow entry through recommendations from formal members. Members can freely use the club's meeting room and various divination rooms and tools. They can enjoy the coffee and tea we provide and read the newspapers and magazines we subscribe for free. They can buy lunch, dinner, and alcoholic beverages at cost price, as well as education materials and materials needed for divination. In addition, we invite at least one famous fortune teller to lecture every month to answer any questions. Most importantly, you can find a bunch of friends with the same hobbies and have an exchange with them. It sounds pretty good, but I do not have the money." Klein gave a self-deprecating smile before asking, "Then what if I want my fortune told?" Chapter 38. Upon hearing Klein's question, the beautiful lady with elegantly tied-up brownish-yellow hair appeared to lose her patience. However, she maintained her smile and said, "Our members are free to do divination for others in the club. They also have their prices, and we take a very tiny cut as a fee. If you wish to have your fortune told, you can take a look at this album. It has introductions and rates of the members who are willing to do divination for others. However, it's Monday afternoon, so most of our members are busy at work. We only have 5 here today. As she introduced the club, she invited Klein to have a seat on the sofa beside a window in the reception hall. Then she flipped through the album and pointed out the present club members. Hannes Vincent, famous Tingen fortune teller, the club's resident mentor, good at various forms of divination. He charges 4 solely each time. It's really expensive. That's enough to feed Benson, Melissa, and me to 2 sumptuous dinners. Klein clicked his tongue silently and did not reply. When the woman saw this, she continued flipping the page and introducing one member after another, and the final one, Glassy, a member who joined the club this year. He is skilled in tarot divination. He charges 2 pence each time. Sir, who do you plan on choosing? Klein did not stand on ceremony and answered, Mr. Glassy. The female attendant fell silent for 2 seconds before saying, Sir, I have to remind you that Mr. Glassy is only considered a novice. I understand. I will be responsible for my own decision. Klein nodded with a smile. Then please follow me. The woman stood up and led Klein through a door beside the reception hall. It was not a very long corridor, and an open meeting room was situated at its end. There was enough sunlight in it. Was equipped with tables and chairs. There were newspapers, magazines, and paper cards. A faint coffee aroma drifted out. About 2 rooms from the meeting room, the attendant gestured for Klein to stop. She sped up her pace and entered the room. She shouted gently, Mr. Glassy, someone wishes for your divination, me? A voice filled with surprise and doubt immediately sounded. Following that, there was the sound of a chair moving. Yes, which divination room would you like to use? Replied the lady without any emotion. Topaz room. I like Topaz. Glassy appeared by the meeting room's door and looked curiously at Klein, who was waiting not far away. He was a man in his 30s. His skin was slightly dark and his pupils were a dark green shade. Under his light, yellow, and soft hair, he was dressed in a white shirt and black vest. A monocle hung from his chest and he seemed to have a good disposition. The attendant did not say anything further as she opened the door to the Topaz room, which was next to the meeting room. The curtains inside were tightly shut, making it dim. It appeared that only by doing so would one gain revelations from the gods and spirits to obtain an accurate divination outcome. Hello there, I'm Glassy. I never expected you to choose me for your divination. Glassy gave a gentleman's bow, briskly stepped into the room, and sat behind a long table. Frankly, am only attempting divination for others. I do not have much experience. For now, am not a good fortune teller. You still have a chance for regret. After Klein returned the bow, he entered and closed the door behind him. By the light seeping through the curtains, he said with a smile, You are a really honest man, but am someone who is very firm on his choices. Please have a seat. Glassy pointed at the seat in front of him and thought for a few seconds. Divination is my hobby in life. One often receives guidance from the divine, but the ordinary person is unable to accurately understand the meaning. This is the reason why divination exists and also why I joined this club. In this aspect, I still lack confidence. Let's make the divination that follows an exchange, a free exchange. How do you like my suggestion? They'll cover the fees the club requires. It's just a quarter pence. Klein did not agree or shake his head. Instead, he smiled. From the looks of it, you have a pretty well-paying and decent job. While he said so, he leaned his body forward slightly. He held his forehead with his right fist and tapped at it twice. But that does not enhance the accuracy of my divination, answered Glassy humorously. Does your head hurt? Do you want to divine problems regarding health? A little. I wish to divine where an item is. Klein had already thought of an excuse as he slowly leaned back. In his eyes, Glass's aura clearly presented itself. The orange colors by his lungs were dark and sparse. They even influenced the brightness in other areas. This is not a symptom of exhaustion. Klein nodded in an indiscernible manner. Are you searching for a lost item? Glassy thought for a few seconds before saying, Then let's do a simple determination. He pushed the neatly stacked tarot cards on the black table toward Klein. Calm down, think of that item and ask yourself, can it still be found? While doing so, shuffle and cut the deck. All right. Klein actually did not remember what the ancient notebook looked like. All he could do was repeat the question to himself. Can the Antigonus family's notebook still be found? While he repeated the thought, he skillfully shuffled and cut the deck. Glassy picked the topmost card and pushed it in front of Klein. The card was facing down horizontally. Turn it clockwise until it sits vertical. Then flip it open. If the card is inverted, which means the picture on the card is facing away from you, it indicates that the item cannot be found. If the card is upright, Then we can continue the divination and seek its actual location. Klein followed his instructions and turned the horizontal card vertical. He clasped the end of the tarot card and flipped it over. It was an inverted card. What a pity! Glassy sighed. Klein did not respond because his attention was focused on the tarot card in front of him. The inverted card's picture was dressed in gorgeous clothes and splendid headdress. The fool. It's the fool again? It can't be so coincidental, right? According to the Hanged Man and Old Neil, divination is the outcome of the communication of spirituality and the spirit world with a higher dimensional me. Tarot cards are only a convenient tool to read what the truth symbolizes, in theory. Using any divination item doesn't matter as it doesn't affect the outcome. Klein frowned as he thought for a moment. Can it be divined whether the item is already in the hands of others? Of course, follow the same procedure and do it again. Glassy nodded with rich interest. Klein shuffled and cut the deck while thinking of his question. He drew a card and placed it horizontally before turning it vertical clockwise. He finished all the preparations with a serious expression. Taking a deep breath, Klein reached out his hand and flipped over the tarot card. Please do not be the fool again. While praying, he suddenly relaxed because the card was that of the star and it was inverted. From the looks of it, the item has not been taken by others yet, interpreted Glassy with a smile. Klein nodded and raised his right hand. He tapped his glabella, looking as though he was deep in thought. Then, he took out 2 pennies with a dark copper luster from his pocket and pushed it towards Glassy. Didn't I say it was free? Glassy said with a frown. Klein laughed as he got up. This is the respect divination deserves. All right. Thank you for your generosity. Glassy stood up and reached out his hand. After shaking his hand, Klein took 2 steps back and turned around. He walked to the door and twisted the doorknob. Just as he was about to leave, he suddenly turned his head and made a terse sound. Mr. Glassy, I suggest that you see a doctor as soon as possible. Focus on your lungs. Why? Asked Glassy in surprise. Are you cursing me because you aren't pleased with the divination results? Klein thought for a moment before saying, it's a symptom based on the color of your face. Well, your glabella seems dark. Glabella seems dark. It was the first time Glassy was hearing such a description. Klein did not explain further as he walked out the room with a smile. He closed the wooden door behind him. Is he an unlicensed doctor or a herbalist? Glassy shook his head, amused. He then picked up his monocle for divination. On careful look, he realized his glabella was indeed dark, but this was a problem of the environment in the darkness due to the closed curtains. Not only was his glabella dark, his entire face was shrouded in darkness. It's not a very likable joke, Glassy muttered. He worriedly divined his own health to make sure that everything was all right. After leaving the divination club, Klein had an additional plan for the future. It was to save as much money as possible to pay the annual fee to become a member of the club, after which he could begin acting as a seer. As for why he did not choose to do it independently, it was because he temporarily lacked the resources and channels. He could not bring himself to stand on the streets as a hawker since he cared for his reputation. A few minutes later, the public carriage arrived. He spent 2 pence and reached Sootland Street, which was not very far off. He pushed open the door to Blackthorn Security Company but did not see the familiar brown-haired girl. He only saw the black-haired, green-eyed Leonard Mitchell with his poetic bearing behind the reception counter. Good afternoon, where's Roseanne? Klein asked after taking off his hat and bowing. Leonard smiled and pointed at the partition. It's her shift tonight at the armory. Without waiting for Klein to ask another question, Leonard said as though he was pondering over a matter. Klein, I have a question that has always puzzled me. What is it? Klein was puzzled. Leonard stood up and smilingly said with a relaxed tone, why did Welch and Naya commit suicide on the spot while you returned home? It likely has to do with how the unknown existence made me take the Antigonus family's notebook away to hide it, answered Klein with the official surmise. Leonard paced around before turning to look straight into Klein's eyes. If your suicide was meant to silence you and wipe out any clues, why weren't you made to destroy the notebook there and then? Chapter 39. In fact, I do not know if the notebook is destroyed or hidden, but by using backward reasoning, if it is to be destroyed, it could have been done on the spot. There was no need for me to take it away to carry out the destruction. Upon hearing Leonard's question, Klein instantly went into keyboard detective mode and said with a sigh, perhaps when Welch, Naya, and I made contact with the unknown existence, it enjoyed the sacrifice of life or wished for similar situations to continue with the Suicide definitely easily discoverable. I was made to take away the notebook to hide it so as to prepare for the existence's second round of entertainment. However, some mishap happened during the process and I failed to succeed in my suicide. This was a reason guess Klein made from his consumption of novels, movies, and TV dramas which involved cult sacrifices. As for the mishap that happened midway, he knew very well that it was due to the unexpected variable of him being a transmigrator. Quite a good explanation, but I believe there might be other possibilities. Welch's and Naya's suicide sacrifice might have made it possible for the unknown existence to descend on this world. Then, that notebook is a vessel or a breeding ground for evil. It made you take it away to hide it, worried that we would destroy it if we discovered its birth before it became strong. Leonard Mitchell suggested another possibility. Having said that, he stared into Klein's eyes and smiled slightly. Of course, perhaps the notebook has been destroyed. The goal is to hide its content, to conceal the vessel or the brooding of evil. That way, there is a sufficient reason for your failed suicide. What does he mean? Is he suspecting me? Is he suspecting that the original Klein's body is a vessel or used for the brooding of evil? No, what he's being a vessel for is a transmigrator. Actually, brooding isn't a correct term. Klein was taken aback. While he secretly criticized the idea, he weighed his words. I will not try to defend myself since I've lost memories from that period, be it Captain or Madame Daly. They have already confirmed that I'm fine. Your joke isn't funny. I'm only considering a possibility. It does not eliminate the blow the unknown existence encountered when it descended which caused your suicide to fail. We believe that the goddess will ultimately bless us. Leonard laughed as he changed the subject. Did you discover anything in the afternoon? After the conversation and the previous encounters, Klein was very wary of Leonard. He answered in a composed manner, No, I plan on trying a different route tomorrow afternoon. He pointed to the partition and said, You'll need to head to the armory to draw the bullets. The shooting club opened to 9 at night. After all, its availability increased only after many of its members got off work. May Goddess bless you. Leonard smiled as he gestured the sign of the crimson moon on his chest. He watched. Klein passed through the partition and listened to his footsteps down the stairs. Leonard's smile gradually vanished as a look of doubt appeared in his green eyes. He whispered something with a displeased tone. Down the stairs, Klein followed the gas lamp-illuminated corridor to the armory and archives. The iron door was open and the brown-haired Rosen was standing in front of the table. She was chatting with a top hat-wearing middle-aged man with a thick black beard. Good afternoon. No. Good evening. It's always night here, Klein. I heard from old Neil that you have become a beyonder? It's called seer? Rosen turned her head and deluged him with her questions. She did not hide her curiosity and concern. Klein nodded with a smile. Good afternoon, Miss Rosen. It's indeed always night here, but it makes one feel a sense of serenity. The description you gave wasn't accurate enough. It should be said that the sequence potion I consumed has the name seer. You still chose to become a beyonder after all. Rosen said with a sigh as she fell into a deep thought. Klein looked at the middle-aged man beside her and asked politely, You are? Another Nighthawk member or one of the other 2 civilian staff I have not met? Rosen puckered her lips and said, Brett, our colleague. He wishes to change slots with me to free up the night after tomorrow. He plans on going to the theater in the North District with his wife to watch The Prideful One. It's to celebrate their 15th-year wedding anniversary. He's truly a romantic gentleman. Brett smiled as he extended his hand and said, with Miss Rosen around, There's nothing that requires repeating. Hello, Klein. I never expected you to become a beyonder so quickly. For me, I might never have the courage. Perhaps it's as the saying goes, the ignorant knows no fear, Klein said in a self-deprecating manner as he extended his hand to shake Brett's. Me not having courage is not something bad, said Brett with a shake of his head. A beyonder once told me before his death to never probe the strange and dangerous matters. The less you know, the longer you live. At that moment, Rosen interjected, Klein, there's no need to mind it. I heard from old Neil that as a seer, you are used as support. It's relatively safe as long as you do not attempt to communicate with unknown existences. Why are you dressed in such clothes? It's so unbecoming of a gentleman. What are you here for? I'm here to draw my 30 bullets. Klein did not reply to Rosen's first question. He believed that the lady would quickly forget the matter. All right, Rose, and pointed at the table and said, Brett, it's all yours. You should know where the keys and bullets are. Oh, old Neil really is petty. He did not even leave his hand-ground coffee behind. He promised me that I could drink my fill today. She prattled on as Klein received the bullets. The duo left together and went their separate ways at Zutland Street. One took a public carriage home while the other walked into the shooting club. Bang, bang, bang. Klein repeated the process, gripping the gun, raising his arms, shooting, releasing the cylinder, ejecting the empty shells, and stuffing in rounds again and again. He became familiar with the process and built it into his muscle memory, of course. He had a few breaks in between to review and correct the process. After finishing his practice, Klein used the grounds to do various exercises like push-ups. He worked hard to train his body to improve his physique. Once everything was over, he sat in an untracked carriage home. Only then he realized it was nearing 7 and the sky was already dark. Just as Klein was planning to head to the market or streets to buy the ingredients for dinner, the door opened. Melissa had returned with her stationery-filled bag. Apart from that, she carried quite a lot of groceries. "I thought you and Benson would be home rather late this morning. I took out one solely from the place you hide the money." Upon seeing her brother's questioning look, Melissa explained in her usual serious manner, "Since you took the money, why didn't you take the public carriage to school?" Klein had been reminded of the matter from the morning. Melissa said with a frown, "Why should I take a public carriage? It costs 4 pence to get to school. A return trip means 8 pence, counting Benson and you. We will be spending 24 pence on transportation daily. That's a whole solely. In a week, yes, without counting Sunday, that's still 12 pence. It's almost equal to our rent." "Stop, stop, stop. Don't flaunt your mathematical prowess." Klein lowered his palm in an amused manner. Melissa first stopped before adding, "It's pretty good walking to school. Our teacher said that everyone should exercise frequently. Besides, I can pick some damaged components on the way." Klein chuckled and said, "Then let's do the math again. The public carriage costs 12 solely. The rent is 12 solely and 3 pence. It's a total of £1 for solely and 3 pence. Using Benson's salary is enough to pay for it, and there will be quite a bit of change left. Yes, he has received last week's salary. As for me, I can still earn £1.10 solely every week, even if we eat meat every day while counting expenses like gas, charcoal, wood, and condiments. We would still have some left if we are frugal with lunch. We can even subscribe to the morning papers for just 1 penny. In 2 months, when I make up for the advanced payment, I can save money for both you and Benson. We can have new clothes, but we have to think of the possible accidents." Melissa stayed firm on her point. Klein smiled at her and said, "Then we can eat less meat. Don't you find spending 50, no, 100 minutes on the road a waste of time? You could use the time to read more and think over problems and improve your results. That way, Melissa, you will be graduate with excellent grades. You will be able to find a job with a pretty good salary. When that happens, what is there to worry about?" He fully displayed his experience gained from debating with people on message boards and finally convinced Melissa. She agreed to take the public carriage to school. "Phew, I finally suckered her into doing it." "No, how can I call it suckering? This is called convincing." Klein lampooned before taking over the groceries that Melissa had bought. He said with a sigh, "Remember to buy beef or meat like mutton and chicken. Eat until you're full and enjoy yourself. Only then will you be equipped with a healthy body and a clever brain to match the demanding requirements needed for your studies." Just mentioning it makes me salivate. Melissa puckered her lips and after a few seconds of silence said, "All right." The next morning, after ensuring that Melissa took a public carriage, Klein and Benson separated and went to their respective companies. The moment Klein stepped into the door, he saw old Neil and Roseanne chatting by the reception desk. The former was still in his classic black robe, without any concern for the gazes of others. The latter had changed into a casual cream-colored dress. "Good morning, Mr. Neil." Miss Roseanne greeted Klein as he took off his hat. Old Neil gave him a mischievous look. "Good morning. You did not hear anything you shouldn't have heard last night, right?" "No, I slept very well." Klein was also quite puzzled over that. He could only put it down to his inadequate perception. "Haha, don't mind that. Actually, it's not that easily heard." Old Neil pointed to the partition and said, "Go to the armory. We will continue out mysticism lessons this morning." Klein nodded and followed Old Neil down the stairs and arrived at the armory to replace Brett, who had been on duty the entire night. "What will we be learning today?" asked Klein curiously. Old Neil dragged out his response and said, "The complicated and basic knowledge. But before that, let me teach you an interesting trick." He pointed at the silver chain on his wrist. There was a pure moonstone hanging from the chain. Chapter 40. An interesting trick? Klein asked out of extreme curiosity. Old Neil chuckled and said, "It'll complete my patrol of the armory, storeroom, and archives. Use the 2 cups on the table to make 2 cups of coffee. In one of the cups, put something unpleasant. As for what it is, you can decide for yourself. Use your imagination. The only request from me is to not waste too much coffee powder. Those are coffee beans grown on the Fanapotter Plateau and hand ground by me. All right, although Klein was unsure what old Neil was up to, he happily agreed to it. He watched him open the iron gates to the armory with a copper key and then heard the echoing footsteps inside, slowly. He settled the cups down and confirmed that there was still hot water in the kettle. He removed the silver tin can's lid and using a tiny spoon with a metallic sheen, Klein scooped a spoonful of rich aromatic coffee powder into each of the 2 cups. Then, he poured in the hot water and stirred it. As a transmigrator who came from an era abundant in resources, he was no stranger to coffee. However, it was only limited to instant coffee. After finishing the task, Klein pondered for a moment and sat down. He crossed his right leg and took some of the mud which had stained the bottom of his leather boots and placed it in the left cup. Then he carefully stirred it again until the colors and smells of the 2 cups of coffee were practically indistinguishable. A few minutes later, old Neil walked out the armory while swinging his keys. He then closed the iron gates with a clang. "Are you done?" He turned his slightly turbid dark red eyes over and looked at Klein across the table. "Yes," replied Klein with a nod. Old Neil chuckled and removed the silver chain around his wrist and sat down. His expression quickly turned serene. He held out his chain-holding left hand and allowed it to hang over the coffee cup to his right. The moonstone nearly touched the liquid. Amid the relaxing calmness, the moonstone trembled suddenly. It began spinning the chain in a counterclockwise manner. "This cup is the one with the unpleasant thing," said old Neil surely. Without waiting for Klein to confirm, he put away the silver chain and picked up the other cup of coffee and took a sip. "Do you like bitter coffee?" Amused to having a tablespoon of sugar and a tablespoon of milk, Klein did not reply but instead asked with his interest piqued, "Your divination sure is accurate. Was it because of the moonstone?" "That was moonstone, right? This is known as pendulum dowsing in divination. It's also called spirit dowsing. It relies on your own astral projections connection with the spirit world and space to communicate with spiritual intelligence through the aid of natural materials such as crystals, gems, or special metals. The good and bad of things can be divined. Let's talk about the 2 cups of coffee. A counterclockwise motion implies bad, while a clockwise motion is good. If it doesn't move, it's neither good or bad. You can write the statement on a piece of paper. Take note, it's a statement and not a question. Old Neil put down the cup of coffee and explained in detail. Klein asked as though he was thinking, "Does that mean one should use questioning sentences?" "Yes, you cannot use is so-and-so willing to be my fiancé, but you should instead use so-and-so is willing to be my fiancé. Write it on a piece of paper and place it on the desk. Then use your dominant hand to hold the pendulum chain." "Take note, use your dominant hand," said old Neil with a chuckle. "When doing so, keep your arms straight. Adjust the chain's length and make the moonstone hang just above the piece of paper to the point of almost touching what we wrote. Then close your eyes and repeat the sentence 7 times in your mind. Open your eyes when you are done and see if the spirit pendulum turns or not. If it doesn't, close your eyes again and repeat the process until it moves." Klein nodded slightly and asked, "Counterclockwise means no, and clockwise means yes?" "It can also be interpreted as success or failure," corrected old Neil. He taught Klein the other usages and details of spirit pendulum divination. Klein pondered over the matter and discovered that it was a very useful divination trick. For instance, he could quickly use it in an unfamiliar environment to determine if the food he was offered was poisonous or not. He did not need any additional knowledge of field biology, of course. Such divination methods were overly simple. The answers he could receive were limited to 2 or 3. There was no way for deeper investigation or interpretation. For example, although something could be harmful to the body, it could become very beneficial after some processing. An example was certain foods. They were indeed damaging to the body, but nothing serious. If one was on the brink of starving, eating it would not be a huge problem. These were things that spirit dowsing could not determine. "I will have to quickly save money to buy crystals or pure silver to create a spirit pendulum." Klein sighed. Old Neil looked at him in puzzlement. "You can apply for one directly. This is standard issue for beyonders, especially beyonders like us who take on a support role. There's still a topaz and pure silver spirit pendulum in the armory, but I'm still not a formal member of the team." Klein's heart palpitated in excitement, but he felt a little hesitant. Old Neil chuckled and said, "For beyonders, regardless of whether they are formal members or not, they have to be provided with conveniences in other areas since there's no pay rise. Maybe the word perk is more suitable. I'll apply with Captain later." Klein clenched his fists secretly as he made up his mind. How was he to know if Captain would approve his request without trying? "All right," said old Neil with a smile. "We can officially begin our mysticism curriculum. The basics consist of symbolism. Do you know what symbolism means?" Klein recalled the bits and pieces he had heard and the things he had seen and heard from his spirit world and the gray fog. He deliberated and said, regardless of the spirit world or the illusory stellar space, as well as the unknown realms, they are beyond our sensory world. It's not something that can be accurately described by the information our ears, nose, and eyes obtain. What we obtain are simply indescribable experiences and direct revelations. They also appear as abstract characters or pictorial symbols. These symbols represent different items and different meanings. Very accurate. As expected of a seer, old Neil nodded solemnly. Only by grasping the ability to interpret the symbols can you really take the next step into the world of mysticism. Yes. The pictures on tarot cards and each of the elements in the pictures are symbols. They are man-made symbols that help us understand and interpret primordial revelations. He pulled out a piece of paper and picked up a fountain pen. Beside him, he drew a short curve. Following that, he added a few vertical lines beneath the curve. He looked up at Klein and asked, "Do you know what the symbol represents?" Klein looked at it for quite a while before saying hesitatingly, "Eyelashes?" Old Neil exhaled. "This is the symbol of the bumper harvest constellation. This is the thunderous constellation, and this is the frost constellation." He casually drew a few more symbols. As Klein memorized them, he could not help but comment, "The names of these constellations are really, especially unsophisticated." Yes, unsophisticated. How tacky and primordial. Old Neil revealed a smile. Emperor Roselle thought the same back then. He always had the intention of changing the constellation names to things like Virgo, Cancer, and Scorpio. Unfortunately, he did not have the strength to go against tradition. At the very least, these constellations' old names and the corresponding dates they represent guide farming and harvests. I have to say that Emperor Roselle sure is a person with ideas. Klein was at a loss for words. Yes, Emperor Roselle was likely a decent person when he was alive. Old Neil was unable to understand Klein's humor as he continued explaining the various basic symbols, such as the various constellations, the sun, the crimson moon, the brown star, the red star, and the blue star. While talking about these, he would teach Klein how to draw the divination astrolabe and indicate what things to pay attention to. He also taught the materials and creation of a crystal ball and the choice of incantations. The teachings overwhelmed Klein. If not for his discovery that the seer potion had improved his memory slightly, he would have long asked old Neil to stop to aid his digesting of the information. That's all for today's mysticism class. Think over it yourself and ask me if you have any questions. Old Neil took out a gold pocket watch and opened it with a snap to check the time. Do not forget to read the historical documents I prepared for you. To be frank, I feel fear seeing them. All right. Klein took the pieces of paper that were sketched with symbols by old Neil. He quickly went through the mysticism knowledge he learned today to prevent himself from forgetting it. Old Neil took a sip of a newly brewed cup of coffee and said, "Memory itself won't do. You have to use it often. That way you can make the knowledge instinctual. Also, cogitation has to be carried on every day. Only more practice and usage will allow you to grasp the power of the potion, digging into the mysteries it hides away and removing its unpleasant effects." With this raised, Klein recalled acting and the divination club. He probed, "My potion's abilities are related to divination. Practicing by myself will not do. I need to make contact with lots of people and divine for them to quickly grasp it. I plan on joining the divination club after having some spare cash. The one on House Street in North Barado become a real seer." This was not something he could hide from the Nighthawks in the future. It was better to prepare them. "Your idea is very similar to Dallas. She has always clamored to be a real spirit medium." Old Neil shook his head and laughed. "But why must you wait till you have spare cash? You can apply to Dunn and get him to approve of the expenses. Organizations like a divination club might also have cultists or members of evil organizations in them. As a civilian staff member of the Nighthawks and a standard Beyonder, your membership makes it easy for us to monitor them. It's part of the job. We would regularly monitor these places, but as we lack manpower, we can't keep watch on them for long. Now, it can be handled to you. I can do that." As he looked at old Neil's serious expression, Klein was dumbfounded. "This is making an expense claim for private matters. I know nothing about such matters. Indeed, I'm just a keyboard warrior. You wish to use your own money to do this?" Old Neil smiled as he added when he saw Klein's face. Klein immediately shook his head as he answered firmly, "I plan on reporting it to Captain." Old Neil nodded in satisfaction and looked at the cup of coffee with the unpleasant thing inside. It had not been poured away. "What did you put in there?" Klein smiled embarrassingly. "It's just some dirt underneath my boots. Its color and your coffee powder looks almost the same." Old Neil was taken aback as he suddenly clasped his mouth and roared, "Why aren't you pouring it away yet?"